Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now, if you haven't subscribed already, please do. It makes all the difference. And today's video is slightly different to the norm, but it features a kind of favourite of mine and a bit of a favourite of yours as well, judging by the comments and the amount of views my video on my Discovery has had so far. But I mentioned in my 2022 roundup video that I really have been thinking for quite some time about building sort of budget overland vehicle. I love a project. I like to get stuck into things when I've got time. And as you may know as well, I own a few Land Rovers, but this old Discovery I bought for about £1,500 last year on a whim. I never really gave them much time of day, but I saw this car, it was offered at the right price, and it's actually been a fantastic workhorse for nearly a year now. I've covered just over 5,000 miles in this since I got it, and I have to say mechanically it's been absolutely faultless. But I didn't really know which car would be best suited for an overland vehicle. I have the Defenders, but they're higher value, they're the obvious choice, but the more I use this old thing, the more I think this is so well suited to it. So plans have been put in place that this car will become an overland vehicle that we build on a budget. And if you guys would like to see the build, let me know, because I'll film a series of videos as well alongside our other classic car videos on the channel, just to give a bit of variety and something a little bit different, and crucially giving the old Discovery a bit of time in the spotlight as well. Because I've said before, I think these cars are a bit of an undiscovered gem. The old early Discoveries are getting rarer, so it'd be nice to do something different with this, and crucially bring it up to a next level and save it from the inevitable scrap heap. But we've got to talk a little bit more about the realities of that, because this car does need some fairly significant work over the next 12 months. So let's just very briefly talk about the realities of what will be a budget overland build, because I think we've all seen those fantastic Instagram shots and YouTube videos of people building very expensive high-end Defenders and Land Cruiser builds. This won't be that. This is done on a shoestring really, but doing the best we possibly can and taking it on some fun trips, and no doubt using and improving it as we go along. And as luck would have it, and it further cements that the classic car community, and in particular the Land Rover community, is a really close-knit group across the world. And I just happened to stumble across an Instagram page a few months ago of somebody that had built their own camper out of a Discovery 1, but they were now thinking of doing something very radical, a complete one-off custom build. And I'll put a link to their Instagram handle below, because it really is fascinating to watch what they're going to do with their car. But with all the changes they were making, they wanted to get rid of their custom setup that they had created for their own car. So for really a bargain price, I managed to pick up a custom build setup that goes in the back of the Discovery. It's got a whole sink and hob unit. It's got seating area that can be turned into a bed if necessary. And crucially, there's 2 custom-made storage areas as well. It's a great setup. And say we picked it up just a few weeks ago now, and it's waiting to go in the car once we've done a lot of essential work beforehand. And we've also bought a full rooftop tent setup with annex as well. I'd wanted one for a long time, and then just at the end of last year I managed to pick one up for the right price, brand new, from a fantastic company called Land Trekker. Now that tent is still in the box. I haven't even taken it out yet. I've been too busy trying to do filming with other stuff and work commitments, and crucially deciding which Land Rover it would be best fitted onto. But the Discovery really is for me. I think the decision's made. This is the car that we're going to go with. So we're going to have a rooftop. We're going to have a custom whole unit built into the back of the car as well. I've got to then look at getting either a full-length proper roof rack for it, or I may go down heavy-duty roof bars. I'm not entirely sure yet. We're going to see how things roll on and progress. So that's the basic level of how things will be kitted out on this overland build. I'm certain we're going to discover that we need more things as we go along. It's an ever-improving process, I'm sure, but We do have to talk about the fact this was a cheap Discovery. It's done now 182,000 miles, and although mechanically I find it to be really strong and it's never let me down, there are some issues that have been flagged up very recently. So it's almost a bit of a case that we're going to have to get those things addressed before we end up with the build. So inevitably this could end up being a fairly costly operation, but I'm looking forward to saving this old car and having plenty of fun and plenty of trips with it in the near future, and crucially bringing you guys along for a slightly different journey than my usual videos on the channel as well. As I mentioned, I've owned this car now for nearly a year, bought on a whim, still bought really very cheaply for one of these. The values of them have slightly risen over the last couple of years, and they seem to continue so as so many of these get scrapped. But I've become quite fond of this thing, but I'm under no illusion really that this car really will require some significant work going forward, and I've got evidence of that here. It's just gone for its MOT, and if you're watching this in other parts of the world other than the UK, the MOT is basically our annual inspection of roadworthiness, so to make sure that the car is safe to be on the roads here in the UK. And I am pleased to say that this car passed. However, there is rather a large list of advisories, and it's never that good when you've got multiple pages handed to you. So I'll highlight some of the more red flag concerns, and I have been told really that this car will not pass an MOT next year without significant structural work. So that's where things have to start with this, and I'll briefly sort of talk through some of those. But also, you know, this car is getting on a bit now. It's done 83,000 miles now. So it's certainly not in its first flush of youth, but mechanically it is very, very strong. Up until fairly recently, I was doing 80 miles a day in this car. Then it was sort of decommissioned as such, and it's been used as a bit of a dog car, potter around the country lanes here, hence why it's absolutely filthy. But I do need to bring it up to a mechanical standard in which, if we want to get in this and go up to Scotland for a week or two, or perhaps take it into Europe and do other things with it, it's going to take some mechanical work as well to make sure that it's in tip-top condition, or as good as a 25-year-old 183,000 mile Land Rover can be. So although everything on this list that's been given to me, and some of it I already knew about, is relevant really for anyone who may be thinking about buying a Discovery of this era. So hopefully, if you are thinking about buying one, this helps you as well. And it also helps me sort of get it out there and say, right, let's prioritize a list of the essential jobs that need to be done. And of course, one big issue with Discoveries of this era is corrosion, and unfortunately this car is now starting to suffer with it. It had significant work a few years ago with the previous owner, but that corrosion has set back in, and we are now looking at both inner wheel arches are fairly heavily corroded. The inner sills are corroded and will need work before the next MOT. The rear boot floor, a very common rust point on a Discovery, is heavily corroded. So we're going to have to look at doing that, especially before we start putting things in the back of the car. Slightly worryingly, and I need a bit further confirmation, I need to get under here and have a real proper look, we've got an advisory on chassis showing signs of corrosion. Now really, if that is too bad, which I don't believe it to be, I did chat with the MOT tester afterwards and there's surface corrosion, but should that be getting any worse, unfortunately it's pretty much game over for one of these. They're not worth the money to start looking at chassis swaps and that kind of thing, as you may do with a Defender. And also, you can't buy off-the-shelf galvanised chassis for Discoveries like you can Defenders as well. So hopefully that's the first place that we have to start. And as I say, hopefully it hasn't got too bad and we can just get it to the best possible standard we can, make sure it's well and truly protected under there, and it lasts many more years to come. A couple of other things that I've highlighted: around 65 miles an hour, this car develops a fairly alarming death wobble. I've had it before with older Land Rovers, and it is quite a scary thing. The only problem being, and you may be watching this and be aware of the problem, it can be a multitude of things, and usually is more than one thing that causes that awful wobble. So at the moment, I'm not using this car for anything out on the motorway until that is properly checked over, looked at and repaired properly. Another thing we need to look at as well, should we be wanting to do more off-road sort of stuff, which I want to bring in with this car, we're going to have to put a decent set of tyres on it. It's got fairly road biased tyres now. I bought them like it. They've served the job, but I think we're going to have to put a decent set of all-terrain tyres on it to make sure we can get anywhere we want to go. But as I say, corrosion is the main factor that we're going to be focusing on with this car first. It's probably going to be done in levels of importance and in increments rather than taking this on as a full-blown restoration project, which, as I say, is unfortunately just not financially viable for one of these cars. But I'm willing to give it my best shot and give it another lease of life and get much more enjoyment and hopefully many more miles out of this old Discovery. There are a couple of other small minor things that have been highlighted as well, such as the rear brake pads are wearing thin. There's a couple of bushes that are starting to wear and will need to be replaced fairly soon. I've also noticed that, notorious for Discoveries of this era, this particular car has the twin sunroofs and they both leak. Absolutely fine in the summer, but we've had a particularly wet and cold winter here, and it is very noticeable when you've got water almost pouring down on some days into the cabin. It soaks the carpet, it makes things seem damp and everything else. So we're either going to look at the cheap route, which is to just seal those sunroofs shut, which is what most people do, or if we can obtain the proper genuine seals, then we'll take these sunroofs out, put new seals in, and fingers crossed they don't leak. But to be honest, they all pretty much leaked from new, so we might have to go with the cheaper and easier plan in the first instance for sure. I understand this video may be a little bit different to the normal ones that you see on the channel, of which there are plenty more classic car videos on the way. There's already plenty on the channel as well, and I've got some really unique and interesting cars lined up that will be featured very, very soon. So please subscribe if you haven't already. But the idea of this video and this project is just to offer a little bit more variety. I'm a massive Land Rover fan. You may know I've owned quite a few over the years. This is my first Discovery, and I thought let's do something special with it. And crucially, the Land Rover community, the classic car community as well, is really all about helping each other, I think. So if you've built one of these cars up for an Overland vehicle, or you've got stories, history with one, or you've got an Instagram page or something as you're using and enjoying these cars, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to share them as well. And I'm sure in turn you will inspire me with my build. But I must say as well very quickly, there is another project car that is coming to the channel. It is not a Land Rover, it is a British modern classic, and it's something I think that offers an absolute bargain into luxury motoring. However, this one needs quite a bit of work. It's going to be a big project. I'm going to be working on this one and having another project side by side in between doing the other classic car videos as well. So it's going to be a very, very busy year, but I hope it just broadens that variety of the channel, brings more people in, and we create a really good classic car community, a great following. And I look forward to updating you with the highs and the lows, of which I'm certain there's going to be some lows with this one in particular as we go along.